إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. So carrying on then from some of the general overall principles regarding al-Asma'u wa-Sifat, the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the fifth principle mentioned here, Asma'ullahi ta'ala tawqifiyyah, la majala lil-aqli fiha. That the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are tawqifi, meaning that you can only affirm what is affirmed in the Quran and the Sunnah. There is no way of assuming or deducing what the names of Allah could be. Rather, it is only based upon the textual evidences, what we find in there, that we affirm as the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tawqifi, that's the meaning of it, that you can only affirm or go off exactly what is in the texts, and you cannot interpret or assume anything over and above that. وعلى هذا فيجب الوقوف فيها على ما جاء به الكتاب والسنة فلا يزاد فيها ولا ينقص لأن العقل لا يمكنه إدراك ما يستحقه تعالى من الأسماء. So we have to stop at what is found in the Quran and the Sunnah, and not to add anything on top of that, not to detract or take anything away from that, because the intellect, it is not possible for it to work out and to assume what is befitting to Allah in terms of names or not. We cannot make the judgment as to what is befitting as a name to Allah or not. So we stop at what is found in the texts and not make our own judgments and make up new names, assuming and thinking from our perspective that these are befitting to Allah. Our minds cannot encompass what Allah is deserving of. فوجب الوقوف في ذلك على النص لقوله تعالى ولا تقف ما ليس لك به علم إن السمع والبصر والفؤاد كل أولئك كان عنه مسؤولا. ولا تقف ما ليس لك به علم, that do not delve into affairs that you have no knowledge of. Do not go into affairs that you have no knowledge of. And this applies to the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we cannot get into that in terms of inventing new names that we think are suitable for Allah. That is then delving into an arena that you do not have knowledge of. And as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the hadith, or the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentioned in the hadith, لا أحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك. Hadith in Sahih Muslim, that I cannot enumerate or encompass the praise upon you. Rather, you are as you have praised yourself. وَالتَّسْمِيَةِ بِالْأَسْمَاءِ مِنَ الثَّنَاءِ. So the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are a form of praise upon Allah. And if the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying, I cannot encompass and lay down some type of criteria to what should be the praise upon you, rather you are as you have praised yourself. فلا يمكن أن ندرك ما يستحقه الله عز وجل فوجب علينا أن نتوقف فيما لم يرد به النص. So we are not able to judge what is deserving to Allah, and so it is necessary for us to stop at what the texts have mentioned and not to go beyond what is mentioned in the texts. This basically means then أنه لا يجوز لنا أن نسمي الله بما لم يسمي به نفسه. It is not permissible for us to name Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with any name that He has not named Himself with. لأن ذلك ليس لنا به علم, because we do not have knowledge in that affair. We cannot attribute and assign any new names to Allah. We do not have knowledge to be able to do that. So in the ayah, when Allah mentioned إِنَّ السَّمْعَ وَالْبَصَرَ وَالْفُؤَادَ كُلُّ أُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ عَنْهُ مَسْئُولًا, that the hearing and the seeing and your heart, all of those you will be questioned upon. السمع للأصوات والبصر للآيان والأفعال والفؤاد للمعقولات. كل هذه الأدوات الثلاث أنت مسؤول عنها. So your hearing, your seeing, and what you perceive and think, all of those affairs you are accountable upon. فلا تسمع ما لم تسمع ولا تري ما لم ترى ولا تتخيل في قلبك ما ليس واقعا. So do not say what you have not heard, and do not show others what you have not seen, and do not imagine that which has no reality to it. عليك باللزوم أنك مسؤول عن السمع والبصر والفؤاد. Upon you is to stick to the texts, because you will be questioned regarding your hearing, your seeing, and your from your heart what you imagine and perceive. لأن الإنسان قد يسمع كلمة ويبني عليها ما ليس له بعلم. Because sometimes a person may hear something and then you assume things based upon what you heard and then start developing conclusions that are incorrect and false. You hear something, some statement, and then assume things based upon it, and therefore start deriving conclusions from it that are false and incorrect and not from the statement that you heard in reality. بناء على هذه الكلمة وقد يرى شيئا ويبني ما ليس له بعلم. You may even see something, but you don't recognize and understand exactly what's going on. From what you see, you base some opinion upon it and start deriving conclusions, and perhaps you're wrong again. Perhaps you don't have knowledge of what is going on, and you are making your assumptions. You may be driving down the motorway and you see the police and the ambulance and the fire brigade, and the motorway closed on the other side, so you go home and saying there was a huge accident. It looked like probably 3 or 4 of them died. And maybe nothing happened. A car flipped over, but he got out alive. Nobody died. You saw it. You saw all of that commotion. But then you built upon it affairs that you have no knowledge of. So a person may even see something, But if you don't have knowledge of what's going on in the background and the context, you can still not build your conclusions upon that. وَقَدْ يَتَصَوَّرُ شَيْئًا وَيَحْكُمُ بِهِ وَلَيْسَ لَهُ بِهِ عِلْمٍ. And you may paint a picture in your mind of what is going on and what is happening, and draw your conclusions upon that and make your rulings upon that. And the reality is, this picture you have made in your mind, it is a false picture. It is an incorrect perception and understanding of the affairs. And so your rulings and your conclusions that you've made are incorrect and false also. فلذلك ذكر الله عز وجل الحس والعقل. الحس في السمع والبصر، والعقل في الفؤاد. ولو أننا التزمنا بهذا التوجيه الإلهي لسلمنا من شرور كثيرة، وأرحنا أنفسنا من شرور كثيرة أيضا. لكن أكثر الناس يبني على ما سمع ما لا ينبني عليه، أو على ما رأى ما لا ينبني عليه، أو على ما يتخيل ما لم يكن واقعا. So the Shaykh says, if we were to stick to what is established and not make assumptions upon something we may hear or something we may see or something that we develop and build a picture of in our minds, if we left all of that aside and stuck to what is clear and established, here in reference to the texts, stick to the texts that are clear and established with the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not go into affairs of assumptions and what you consider to be good and befitting and making things up, then we would, the Shaykh says, we would be able to bring a lot of calm and comfort and ease to ourselves, and remove a lot of the disturbance in the affairs. So that is an important rule to remember regarding the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they are tawqifi. They stop at what is in the texts. What you find in the texts, you stop at that. And you do not go beyond that, trying to build upon that, and then assumptions upon that, and expand upon that. There is no expansion upon it. What is there in the Quran and the Sunnah, you stop at that. لأن تسميته تعالى بما لم يسمي به نفسه أو إنكار ما سمى به نفسه جناية في حقه تعالى. Because naming Allah with a name that He did not name Himself with, or on the other side, rejecting a name that He did name Himself with, then both of those actions are a crime against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is transgression against the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to name Him with something He did not name Himself with, or to reject a name that He did name Himself with. فَوَجَبَ سُلُوكُ الْأَدَبِ فِي ذَلِكَ. So it is required that you tread upon the pathway of etiquette in this field, upon the manners and the etiquette that is befitting of the talib al-ilm, of the believer, in regards to his aqīdah in al-asma'i wa sifat, and you do not go beyond the boundaries in those affairs. وَالِاقْتِصَارُ عَلَى مَا جَاءَ بِهِ النَّص, and that you restrict yourself to what is mentioned in the texts and do not go beyond that. Al-Shaykh al-Uthaymīn gives an example. أرأيت لو أن شخصا سماك بغير ما سميت أو تسميت به لعد ذلك جناية. That if somebody was to call you by a name that is not your name, then that would be considered as transgression against you, calling you something that isn't your name. لأنه ليس له حق التسمية. He doesn't have the right to give you whatever name he wants and say, that's what I'm going to call you, even though it's not your name. But I think that name suits you, I'm going to call you that name from now on. And it's not your name. And you tell him, but that's not my name. Then that would be considered as transgression upon you. What is he doing? He has no right to just pick whatever name he thinks suits everybody's faces and then call them how he wants. So ليس له حق التسمية. فلو سماك أبوك مثلا بمحمد فلا يجوز لأحد أن يقول سأسميك علي. Your father called you Muhammad, your name is Muhammad. Somebody comes along and says, no, but I think Ali suits you, I'm going to call you Ali. Incorrect, not permissible, not correct. أو سماك أبوك سليمان فقال شخص لا أنا أسميك سليما فليس له ذلك لأنه لا يملك هذا لأن التسمية حقها لمن له الحق أن يسمي. Naming is the right of the one who has the right. So in terms of the children, the right is there with the father. It is not anybody comes along and says, I'm going to call you this or that. فالله عز وجل. So when it comes to the names of Allah, the right clearly and obviously is the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to His names. It is not your right to say, I'm going to call Allah by this name or that name. You would not even do that to the people. A person's name is Muhammad, you cannot say, I'm going to call you Ali from now on forever. Cannot do that even to a person in creation, let alone to the Creator. The right is the right of Allah. It is not your right to pick and choose and decide what names you will call Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with over and above what Allah has mentioned for Himself. أما نحن فليس من حقنا أن نسمي الله بما لم يسمي به نفسه لأن ذلك جناية في حقه تعالى. So it is not our right to call Allah by whatever names we want to call Him by. That would be considered as an oppression, a transgression against the rights of Allah. وكذلك إنكار ما سمى به نفسه جناية في حقه تعالى كأن يسمي نفسه بأسماء ثم تقول لا أنا لا أسميه بها إذ إن الواجب عليك أن تسمي الله بما سمى به نفسه. And also on the other side of the scale, that a person says, I refuse to name Allah with the names that Allah has indeed named Himself with. That would also be considered as a transgression on your part. فصار تسمية الله بما لم يسم به نفسه سوء أدب مع الله وإنكار ما سمى به نفسه كذلك سوء أدب مع الله. So naming Allah with that which Allah did not name Himself with, or rejecting what Allah did name Himself with, both of those are considered as evil and bad etiquette toward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فالواجب علينا سلوك الأدب معه سبحانه وتعالى والتوقف والاقتصار على ما جاء به النص. So what is obligated upon us is to tread upon that correct methodology of etiquette when it comes to this Aqidah, when it comes to the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to stop at what the texts they highlight and not to go beyond that. Then al-Qaaidah as-Sadisah. أسماء الله تعالى غير محصورة بعدد معين. The names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are not restricted by any specific number. The names of Allah are not limited to any particular number. لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم في الحديث المشهور, due to the statement of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم in the famous hadith, أسألك بكل اسم هو لك, that I ask you by every name that you have, سميت به نفسك, that you named yourself with, أو أنزلته في كتابك, or you revealed in your book, أو علمته أحدا من خلقك, or you taught anyone from your creation, أو استأثرت به في علم الغيب عندك, or you kept it to the knowledge of the unseen to yourself. This hadith affirms that there are names that we are yet unaware of, that Allah has names that we are yet unaware of, because the Messenger affirms, أو استأثرت به في علم الغيب عندك, names that you have kept to the knowledge of the unseen to yourself. There are names that we are unaware of yet. How many are those names that we are unaware of yet? We don't know. And so the very basic and simple mathematics says, if you have an unqualified number in that equation, it is impossible to get to a final equation or a final conclusion. 5 plus question mark equals what? Impossible. Without any other factors, impossible. So now we have an impossible equation here. We do not know how many names that we don't know. So even if we found all of the names in the Quran and the Sunnah, added all of them up, there is still going to be an unknown figure at the end. Therefore, we can never come to an exact conclusion Allah has this many names. Impossible. And even on the issue of looking through the Quran and the Sunnah and adding them all up, scholars did that. In the past, scholars did that. And in some of the books of Aqidah, you'll see that, where the scholars, they highlighted all of the names that they found in the Quran and the Sunnah. And some of them got to 130 odd names that they found in the Quran and the Sunnah. Some of them in their books of Aqidah, they got up to the list 120 odd. Some of them up to 110 odd. So even the issue of Allah only having 99 names, in reality that has already been surpassed. More than that have already been found in the Quran and the Sunnah by many of the scholars of the past, who got beyond 100 that they found and observed in the Quran and the Sunnah. So this hadith is a proof that there are names we are yet unaware of. They are names that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept in the knowledge of the unseen with Him. Then, أما قوله إن لله 99 اسما 100 إلا واحدا من أحصاها دخل الجنة. That indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has 99 names, 100 minus 1. Whoever أحصاها, meaning understands them, memorizes them, acts upon them. That's the meaning of أحصاها. أحصاها doesn't just mean reading them, enumerating them. It is learning them, understanding them, memorizing them, acting upon them. Whomsoever does that, دخل الجنة, then he will enter paradise. This is the hadith that in fact people use to say that Allah only has 99 names, because the hadith says, indeed Allah has 99 names, 100 minus 1. Whomsoever enumerates them, memorizes them, acts upon them, enters paradise. So then how do we understand this? The scholars have mentioned this hadith is not highlighting a restriction. The hadith is not highlighting a restriction. And the example they give in some of their books is along the lines of saying, if a person comes now, for example, comes into the mosque now and says, I have £100 in my pocket, which I have here in my pocket ready to give as a donation to the mosque. A person walks in and he says, I have £100 in my pocket. I'm going to give that as a donation to the mosque. How much money does this person have?
More than 100.
No idea. Why not?
At least I have 100 to give out.
You mean you don't know how much more he might have in his bank account?
Yeah, at least 100.
At least 100. If he takes the example of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, that time when the Prophet ﷺ said, we want to collect charity. Authentic hadith. So at that time, there was this one occasion, the messenger said, we want to collect some charity. We are in need of gathering some charity. When that announcement was made by the messenger, in the narration, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu says, that at that time, I was doing well. At that time when the messenger made that announcement, I was doing well for myself. So he says in the narration that I decided this is my opportunity. I'm going to beat Abu Bakr. I'm going to give more than what Abu Bakr gives. Because he said I had a good amount at that time. So he said, I thought to myself, if ever I'm going to beat Abu Bakr in an action of goodness, this is my chance. So then he comes with half of all of his wealth. Imagine a person now has 20,000, 10,000 withdraws in and says, here, take it. Half of his wealth. Everything he owns, half of it he came and put it down. And the messenger said to him, what have you left for your family? He said, I have left for them the likes of it. Half. This is half of all of my wealth, 50% of my wealth. I've left 50%. And that would have been a lot. It was a large amount from what he had at the time. So then he says, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu came. And he put down his wealth. And it was a large amount. So the Prophet ﷺ said to him, what have you left for your family? He said, I have left for them Allah and His Messenger. That was his 100% of everything he owned. He had brought everything he had and put it down and given it. And so then Umar ibn al-Khattab said after that, I'm never going to try and compete with Abu Bakr. So, but the scholars, of course, they say you do not give 100% of your wealth because there are rights you have to fulfill. Your rights of the family, your wives, your children, of course. And this was a specific example of the great Iman of Abu Bakr. And it's mentioned in the narrations, if the Iman of Abu Bakr was put on one side of the weighing scale and the Iman of the Ummah on the other side, Abu Bakr would be heavier. So, so a person, he comes in and he says, I have £100 in my pocket ready to give as a donation to the mosque. Nobody would assume that this person has just withdrawn every penny he owns. We know that he has other money, but he's brought 100 here for this purpose of donation. The scholars, they say this is the same type of narration. Allah is not telling us that He only has 99 names. Allah is telling us that from all of the names that He has, if you memorize and learn and act and implement 99 of them at least, then you will have this reward of entering paradise. Not that there are no other names beyond the 99, but that this reward is connected to the figure of 99. If you learn, memorize, act upon at least 99, you have the reward, dakhal al-Jannah. So there is no restriction here to say that Allah only has 99. Rather, it's like the man who comes and says, I've got 100 for the mosque. We are saying, from all of the names of Allah, 99 of them, take them, memorize them, act upon them, learn them, and you'll have this reward. So the hadith is not a restriction to 99, and as we saw the other narration as well, combined with it, highlights that there are more than 99, there are names that we are unaware of yet. And on top of the fact that the scholars, they researched and already found more than 99 anyway. Some of the scholars in the past, in their books of Aqidah, you'll see they already found more than 99 in the Quran and the Sunnah. So that hadith, it is not to be used as an evidence that Allah only has 99 names. There is another version of this hadith. إن لله 99 اسما من أحصاها دخل الجنة وهي, and then it lists out 99 names. In another version of the hadith, that indeed Allah has 99 names, 100 except one, whomsoever memorizes and acts upon them will enter paradise, and they are, and then it lists out all of the names. That version of the hadith is not authentic. That version of the hadith that lists out all of the names is not authentic. There are issues in the chain of narration. There is tadlis, al-Walid ibn Muslim and other things. That version isn't authentic with the list of names. But the basic version from the beginning, Allah has 99 names except 100 except one. Whomsoever memorizes, learns and acts upon them will enter paradise. Up to there, that version is authentic. Then, in fact, it's the example the Shaykh gives right here. It is from here. It's where he says, a person says, عندي 100 درهم أعددتهم للصدقة فإنه لا يمنع أن يكون عندك دراهم أخرى لم تعدها للصدقة. So that's like the person who says, I have 100 here for charity, and that does not mean that this person does not have any other money besides that 100. ولم يصح عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم تعيين هذه الأسماء والحديث he mentions this too والحديث المروي عنه في تعيينها ضعيف, that the narration that has been mentioned regarding the list of names and the exact number of them, that is a weak version of the hadith. قال شيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية في الفتاوى من مجموع ابن قاسم, that's the one which is 37 volumes, تعيينها ليس من كلام النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم باتفاق أهل المعرفة بحديثه. Specifying, listing out all of the names, that narration is not from the speech of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, by agreement of the scholars who have knowledge regarding hadith and the sciences of hadith. وقال قبل ذلك, and he said before that, إن الوليد ذكرها عن بعض شيوخه الشاميين كما جاء مفسرا في بعض طرق حديثه. This is talking about the chain of narration and some of the deficiencies that exist in that chain of narration. And so it is not authentically established, a hadith that talks about the names listed out. So the point here is to highlight that the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are not restricted. And there is another evidence too. Not just the narration about the messenger saying, and I ask you by the names that you have kept concealed in your knowledge of the unseen. That is one clear proof there are more names we don't know yet. But there's another clear proof that there are more names that we don't know yet. Another hadith. Anyone know?
When the messenger of Allah would do sajda from the throne of Allah, and Allah would inspire him to call upon him in a certain way as not called upon him before.
So on Yawm al-Qiyamah, in one of the ahadith regarding the shafa'ah, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he goes to do the shafa'ah, then he prostrates before the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then when he raises his head, he mentions in the hadith, فَيُفْتَحُ عَلَيَّ بِمَحَامِدْ لَمْ أَكُنْ أَعْرِفْهَا مِنْ قَبْلِ. that at that time I am made aware of forms of praise to Allah that I did not know before. And the scholars, they say that is in reference to becoming aware of more of the names of Allah that we were not aware of before, that the Messenger had not been told before. So there are clear evidences that the names of Allah are not restricted to 99. And so these posters that you see and all these things that they make, that is not an evidence to think that Allah only has 99 names. Those posters, they have the English meanings and definitions of the names of them, but it is not to be thought that the names of Allah are restricted in that way. الشيخ العثيمين says وقد جمعت 99 اسما مما ظهر لي من كتاب الله تعالى وسنة رسوله. That Shaykh al-Uthaymeen says he himself already compiled 99. He compiled 99 of the names that were made apparent to him from the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Messenger, and then he mentions 99 of the names here, and all of these we've done them in al-Wasitiyyah, and we'll go through that list in al-Wasitiyyah further. At the end he mentions al-Muhsin. Al-Muhsin, is it one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? There is some difference between the scholars over the name al-Muhsin. And so al-Shaykh Abdul Razzaq al-Abbad, of course his father is called Abdul Muhsin, so he went and did the research and wrote a small risala proving that al-Muhsin is one of the names of Allah. So هذا ما اخترناه بالتتبع 81 اسما في كتاب الله و18 اسما في سنة رسول الله. This is what Shaykh al-Uthaymeen compiled here. He mentions 81 names from the Book of Allah and 18 from the Sunnah of the Messenger. They are there highlighted. Then القاعدة السابعة الإلحاد في أسماء الله تعالى هو الميل بها عما يجب فيها. Al-Ilhad in the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-Ilhad لغة الميل ومنه اللحد في القبر لأنه مائل إلى جانب منه. Al-Ilhad, when you hear about this regarding the names of Allah, linguistically, al-ilhad means to deviate from somewhere, to bend away, to lean away, to deviate away from something. And so, for example, even in the grave, when the grave is dug for the Muslim to be buried, there is within the grave what is known as al-lahad, which is a portion of the grave that is away from the main hole that is dug. Because you dig the hole and then at the bottom you dig a hole into the side. And the person is buried into that side, it's covered up, then the main hole is covered up. Or you dig the main hole, the main area, and then at the bottom of the hole you dig another hole within the hole. And then bury the person in that, cover it up, then cover the main hole. So you have that lahad, that additional compartment within the grave that is dug, either at the bottom to the side or in the bottom of the grave, another grave within the grave kind of thing. That is the lahad, because that is then away from, leaning away, pointing away from the main dig. It is now to the side here or to the side within it. So that is where linguistically the word al-ilhad is from. And here, in terms of the names of Allah, al-ilhad is in reference to turning away and deviating away from the actual intent and actual meanings and affirmation of those names of Allah. فَهُوَ الْمَيْلُ بِهَا نعم قال تعالى وذروا الذين يلحدون في أسمائه فهو الميل بها عما يجب فيها. هذا الضابط للإلحاد في أسماء الله. It is to deviate away in any aspect from what is required and necessitated to be in place for the names of Allah. So for example, as we've mentioned before, لو سميت الله بغير ما سمى به نفسه لكنت ملحدا في الأسماء. If you name Allah with something that Allah has not named Himself with, then you have deviated away from that. You have gone astray from the upright path in regards to the names of Allah. So you are a mulhid in that regard. لأن الواجب الاقتصار على ما ورد به النص لأنها توقيفية. ولو أثبتت الأسماء دون ما تضمنتها من الصفات لكنت ملحدا فيها. And if you affirm the names but reject the attributes like we spoke about last week, then again you've deviated away from the straight path of what is required in the names of Allah. So you are a mulhid once again in that regard. لأن الواجب إثباتها مع ما تضمنته من الصفات. And then he highlights وهو أنواع. So there are different types of this ilhad that may occur. الأول أن ينكر شيئا منها أو مما دلت عليه من الصفات والأحكام. That a person rejects anything from them or from what they indicate in terms of the attributes or the rulings. كما فعل أهل التعطيل من الجهمية وغيرهم, as they did those who rejected the names like the Jahmiyyah and the attributes among them. وإنما كان ذلك إلحادا لوجوب الإيمان بها. So their action is considered as al-ilhad because the obligation is to believe in the names and attributes of Allah. وبما دلت عليه من الأحكام والصفات اللائقة بالله فإنكار شيء من ذلك ميل بها عما يجب فيها. And so, because of what the names indicate from the rulings and attributes that are befitting of Allah, they rejected or turned away from them also, then all of that is considered under the banner of al-ilhad. Shaykh al-ʿuthaymīn gives further examples here, but to summarize and to keep it as brief as possible, سبق أن الإيمان بالاسم لا بد له من ثلاثة أمور في المتعدي وأمرين في اللازم. بعض المؤلفين ذكر أن الرحمن اسم أعجمي لم تكن العرب تعرفه وعليه فهم ينكرونه. There are some who say that Ar-Rahman is non-Arabic in origin. It's a non-Arabic name in origin. And so they reject it. What do we say? الجواب الذي قال إن الرحمن اسم أعجمي هو الأعجمي لأنه لا يعرف لغة العرب. The one who says that Ar-Rahman is non-Arabic, then he himself must be a non-Arab, because he clearly does not understand the Arabic language. In fact, A'jami doesn't necessarily mean just non-Arab, it means the one who does not speak the Arabic language, has no understanding of the Arabic language, no fluency in the Arabic language. لأنه لا يعرف لغة العرب. لكن هم أنكروا هذا إنكارا للاسم. ولهذا جاءت ما التي يستفهم بها عن الوصف دون من التي يستفهم بها عن التعيين في قوله تعالى وإذا قيل لهم اسجدوا للرحمن قالوا وما الرحمن. So they rejected this as a name, and that's why ma al-istifhamiyya, that is used to ask about a description in Arabic, whereas man is used to ask about some specific individual. So here in the Quran it mentions, when it was said to them prostrate to Ar-Rahman, they said, وَمَا Ar-Rahman. And what is Ar-Rahman, rather than who is Ar-Rahman. فَمَنْ وَمَا اسم استفهام، لكن إن أريد الاستفهام عن العين فهو بمن، وإن أريد الاستفهام عن الوصف فهو بما. يعني من هو الذي له الرحمة الواسعة، لأن الرحمن على وزن فعلان وهي تدل على سعة. So here the usage of ma and man also indicates what they were upon, and Allah highlights that in the Quran. So they rejected the name Ar-Rahman, for example. That is just one example of some of them, and this is all under the banner of al-Ilhad. الثاني أن يجعلها دالة على صفات تشابه صفات المخلوقين كما فعل أهل التشبيه، وذلك لأن التشبيه معنى باطل لا يمكن أن تدل عليه النصوص، بل هي دالة على بطلانه، فجعلها دالة عليه ميل بها عما يجب فيها. The second type of ilhad is on the other end of the spectrum, where they make the names indicative of attributes, and يجعلها دالة على صفات, indicative of attributes that resemble the attributes of creation, as Ahlul Tashbih they did. Because you remember in the early stages of al-Wasitiyyah we mentioned there are two main groups of the mulhidun when it comes to the names and attributes of Allah. On one side the Mu'attilah, and on the other side the Mushabbihah. The two main groups. The Mu'attilah reject, the Mushabbihah affirm, but to an exaggerated level whereby they resemble Allah to creation. And that's why the scholars they mention, I think Shaykh al-Islam and others, that both of these groups, the Mu'attilah and the Mushabbihah, they began with something that was correct, but they exaggerated, they fell into ghulu in that affair, and they went beyond the boundaries of it and fell into al-ilhad. So the Mu'attilah, they said, principally, we cannot compare Allah to creation. That is absolutely correct. But then they exaggerated and went into ghulu to such an extent upon that basis of saying we cannot resemble anything with Allah ever. They said in the end, from their ghulu and exaggeration, look, the only way we're going to be able to definitely not compare anything to Allah is just say Allah doesn't have any names or attributes, in a nutshell. Because then they say we're completely free of comparing Allah to anything in creation. We're not affirming any names or attributes to Allah, therefore we cannot possibly be comparing Him to anything in creation. And of course, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah said, you have fallen into the exact thing that you were running away from. Because by stripping all of the names and attributes, then you are left with, on any item now, when you strip away all of the names, all of the attributes, you have nothing left. So you have compared Allah to nothingness. And as for the Mushabbihah, they began with a sound principle. They said, look, we have to affirm what Allah has affirmed in the names and attributes. Absolutely correct. But then they went into ghulu with that affirmation, in a nutshell, to the extent where they said, look, Allah is only going to mention these names and attributes to us in a way that we comprehend them. So these names of Allah and these attributes of Allah, they've got to be like what we know here in creation. And so then they made resemblance between Allah and creation. And so their exaggeration in affirmation led them to make Allah in the resemblance of their false belief like an idol. So here it's the second side of it. The second side of al-ilhad, أن يجعلها دالة على صفات تشابه صفات المخلوقين كما فعل أهل التشبيه. وذلك لأن التشبيه معنى باطل لا يمكن أن تدل عليه النصوص. Resemblance between Allah and the creation is something completely false. It cannot be indicated or found in the texts at all. بل هي دالة على بطلانه فجعلها دالة عليه ميل بها عما يجب فيها. So if you fall into that, you are also falling into ilhad. الثالث أن يسمى الله تعالى بما لم يسمي به نفسه كتسمية النصارى له الأب وتسمية الفلاسفة إياه العلة الفاعلة، وذلك لأن أسماء الله تعالى توقيفية، فتسمية الله تعالى بما لم يسمي به نفسه ميل بها عما يجب فيها، كما أن هذه الأسماء التي سموه بها نفسها باطلة ينزه الله تعالى عنها. And the third is naming Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with names that Allah did not give Himself. An obvious example mentioned here is like the Christians. They call Allah the Father, Al-Ab, our Father art thou in heaven, and all those things from the verses that they quote. Father. So Al-Ab, it is not from the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is considered from the forms of al-ilhad. Rather, you have to free Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from these deficiencies, these false names that are being made and are being quoted. And that's why you see the misguidance of some of the callers who do not have a detailed understanding of Aqidah, a detailed understanding of names and attributes and these affairs, and neither have they ever studied that with the scholars, ever studied books of Aqidah one after the other. And so they make claims that it is okay to mention any name that indicates and references Allah for you. You probably know from a few years ago, Zakir Naik, etc., saying these types of things, that it's an open type of matter. Whatever indicates Allah, then it's Allah. It is not like that. The names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are restricted and they are tawqifi. The fourth, أن يشتق من أسمائه أسماء للأصنام. The fourth type of ilhad, that you derive from the names of Allah names for the idols. And this is what the mushrikun they did. They took the names of Allah and they named their idols with it. كما فعل المشركون في اشتقاق العزى من العزيز واشتقاق اللات من الإله على أحد القولين فسموا بها أصنامهم. Even al-Manat, some of the scholars they say that's from al-Mannan. So here, this type of practice where they took the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and derived from them upon feminine derivations the names of their gods, then this is also a form of al-ilhad in the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then the Shaykh says, وذلك نعم فسموا بها أصنامهم وذلك لأن أسماء الله تعالى مختصة به. The names of Allah are specific to Him. لقوله تعالى ولله الأسماء الحسنى فادعوه بها، وقوله الله لا إله إلا هو له الأسماء الحسنى، وقوله له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض. All of these ayat mentioning that to Him belong the best and beautiful and perfect of names. فكما اختص بالعبادة بالألوهية الحق وبأنه يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض فهو مختص بالأسماء الحسنى، فتسمية غيره بها على الوجه الذي يختص بالله عز وجل ميل بها عما يجب فيها. So just as Allah is specified with worship, Allah is specified with these names. And so taking them and naming others in derivatives of that, then it is not permissible as the mushrikun they did. وَالْإِلْحَادُ بِجَمِيعِ أَنْوَاعِهِ مُحَرَّمٌ لأن الله تعالى هدد الملحدين بقوله وذروا الذين يلحدون في أسمائه سيجزون ما كانوا يعملون. ومنه ما يكون شركا أو كفرا حسب ما تقتضيه الأدلة الشرعية. So some of it can end up being shirk and kufr in accordance to what the evidences they highlight, and there is a threat against those who perform ilhad in the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That brings us to the end of the section. In brief, only briefly we've gone over that there, the section regarding the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.